Today we will conclude our Pythagorean journey, which is the study of the Golden Verses. I have handed out diagrams number 1 and 2 again, because I was unsure if everyone had received them. The third one is the one with Pythagoras and the small pyramid, which you already have with you. Before we resume from verse 52, I would like to reiterate a point that perhaps was not so clear last week. When Pythagoras speaks, and he says this many times, that we should act according to principles, this does not mean that our actions should be cold or devoid of feelings. It means that our feelings should be summoned from above downward. If I ask you to provoke an emotion, generally, the emotions we access are those of the type I like it or I don't like it, are whims, passions, and rejections. We do not often use our higher emotions, the level that we call feelings. Those who come to take the philosophy course will see that there are various levels within the affective phenomena, the highest of which are feelings. A person can have an emotionally intense life and never have experienced a true feeling. There was a philosopher named Seneca who belonged to a school called Stoicism, which was characterized by the control its followers had over their own emotions. Serenity was one of the attributes of the Stoic philosopher. One day, someone is said to have told Seneca, "You are very cold, you have no feelings." And he is said to have replied, "On the contrary, I have only feelings. What you have is something else. I have only feelings." In other words, feelings are the highest level within our emotional plane. Below them are emotions, passions, desires, and rejections. So, when you move to the mental plane and evoke beautiful, noble, and just ideas, this immediately resonates in the emotional plane and draws out feelings, the best feelings. The best way to purify emotion is to draw upon elevated thoughts, which will resonate in the emotional plane and generate elevated feelings, will echo in the energetic plane and generate highly positive energies, will echo in the physical plane and generate drive, motivation, and initiative. When we start from above, taking what is most elevated from the mental plane, automatically, in a fraction of a second, this is reflected in all the lower planes, drawing in that which is on the same level. The best thoughts will evoke the best feelings, energies, and actions. Action is never cold. On the contrary, it is inspired by noble feelings. In fact, there is an Indian classic, the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna speaks about this. All those who come to me with purity of intention and elevated feelings, I welcome them all. In other words, up there, the finest of the mental plane and the finest of the emotional plane walk together. If we start from the bottom up, we will draw in the more ordinary levels of the emotional plane, which usually do not align with our principles, those we use most often. The idea is always to start from the top down, very elevated feelings and thoughts, and soon you will also be resonating emotionally. It happens in such a tiny fraction of a second that you don't even notice. It seems to happen instantly. An elevated thought echoes through all the lower planes. You get up from your chair and take action. It's almost simultaneous. So, action based on principles is not an emotionally cold action. I thought it was important to emphasize this detail. On the contrary, it is motivated by the best of feelings, the one we rarely use, and that we are only able to evoke if we draw from the mental plane. Otherwise, we become ordinary, routine. So, we will begin from verse 52 and go up to verse 72, concluding there. We will do a brief overview of the ideas that have been presented. Remember, my intention is for you to have memorized at least the ideas. I am not referring to the exact words. I really enjoy teaching the Study Techniques course. One of the things I teach is that a good summary does not work with the words of the text, but rather with the ideas. The words in a text can be archaic or uncommon, and memorizing those exact words will only make things harder for you. The essence, the ideas, should be conveyed in words that are familiar to you. In the case of the Golden Verses, memorizing all of them would be wonderful. But that is complex. There are 72 verses. At the very least, keeping the main ideas in mind would be very beneficial. It is also helpful to have the complete verses stored somewhere accessible, so that from time to time we can read them. Reading one verse a day, in the morning, a time that inspires us, certainly sets a very elevated tone for the day. Because the way we begin anything sets the tone for how it will continue, right from the start. The way we begin a day sets the tone for everything we will do on that day. That is why we have the tradition of New Year's Day, of the first day of the year. There is a certain truth to it. In Rome, the patres familias understood this. For them, the beginning of anything had to include some kind of ceremony. They knew that the energy of beginnings would resonate throughout the entire process. If we understood this, we would not wake up just any way. Just a minute or two of good reading, you have no idea the difference it makes. A good song playing, a good reading, this gives the day a completely different tone. We begin to draw out the best, starting from the mental plane. So let's continue. Verse 52. 52, you will see just how far the diversity among beings goes, and you will see that which contains them and keeps them united. Look at how curious this is. He is speaking about variety and unity. After all, do beings possess variety or unity? They possess both. We could draw a parallel. Even though the human being is considered an animal, traditionally, philosophy did not see it that way. It considered nature evolves from the mineral to the plant to the animal, and the human would be a separate, self-aware experience. Reflective consciousness would give humans a completely unique characteristic. Notice how interesting it is when we look at the plant kingdom, or the animal kingdom, or the mineral kingdom. Within the animal kingdom, for example, there is a tremendous variety of forms. There are creatures ranging from insects to lions, elephants, and whales. The diversity of forms is immense. If we consider the human being as a separate kingdom, as the traditions say, it seems a bit strange because we are not varied, we are all very similar. Human beings are quite uniform, from an external point of view, everywhere in the world. So where did all that variety go? It went inward. All the diversity is at the psychological level. Among us, there are people ranging from the most ignorant to the wisest of men. There is such a vast diversity of forms from a psychological and mental perspective, as great as the diversity between a blade of grass and a baobab tree, or from an insect to a lion. In humans, this diversity is internalized, so humans are truly diverse, and it is important that we recognize this. Pythagoras spoke a great deal about this. If you want to help humanity, you must understand it. You must understand the life equation of each human being in order to offer them the next step. Nature does not make leaps. This understanding is fundamental for anyone who wishes to help another person, for anyone who wants to act in a beneficial way toward humanity. To understand the vast diversity among human beings, but at the same time to know that if we look deeper, we will find a divine essence in everyone. This essence is very similar in all beings, a divine essence. We may have greater or lesser awareness of it, but the essence is identical. This makes a great difference because the true hallmark of evolution is the possibility of expanding our consciousness. It is no use to be divine if we are unaware of it, as it will not make much difference. It is like being in a market, hungry, with money in your pocket, but not knowing that the money is there. The money will be useless. Consciousness allows resources to become useful, to meet your needs. Consciousness is always the touchstone, so, in essence, we are all divine. What varies is the level of consciousness we have of this fact. To recognize the identical essence of all beings. and, at the same time, the diversity of their state, their level, the psychological form in which they find themselves at this moment, and to understand that we are a mixture, as Plato said, of both, of that which is one and that which is diverse, simultaneously. This drives Westerners crazy, because the Western mindset is Manichaean and exclusionary. Either you are this or you are that. We cannot conceive one can be both at the same time. In the East, everything exists simultaneously. The world is one and it is dual. Things are soft and they are resilient. There is no being that is absolute. Every being has an attribute and its opposite. And, in general, one predominates over the other, and this gives a certain profile. All beings have an attribute and its opposite. We possess the attribute of eternity, of unity, of temporality, and of multiplicity. We are all different, but at the same time, we are all the same. I really appreciate intelligent advertisements, which are rare, as they are a form of art. I saw on a billboard several hearts, not the romantic heart, but the organic heart that beats in the chest. There were several photos. In fact, it was the same heart repeated multiple times. All the hearts are the same. They wrote beneath each heart, white, black, Asian, Jewish, Arab. These names showed that they were different human beings, but the hearts were identical. I found it so intelligent. We don't need to go deep into metaphysical levels. Just by looking a little beyond the surface of the skin, within the physical body itself, we find things that are the same. The hearts of human beings are all very similar. In other words, the differences are superficial, but they exist and must be taken into account. They create tendencies and predispositions that must be considered when we interact with this person. But in essence, we are very much alike. We are cells of a single unity. To see God in all things, to see God in every being. 53. You will then see, in accordance with justice, that the substance of the universe is the same in all things. I have shared this example many times in my lectures on YouTube. I really like this example, which comes from the Indian Vedanta school of Shankaracharya. It's perfect, no better example found, so I repeat it 1,000 times. It's the example of the Satratma. It goes like this. Let us imagine the story of the evolution of each human being as a small pearl on a necklace. At first, this pearl only looks outward. Let's say it's made of acrylic. It only looks outward and keeps competing with the other pearls. It looks outward and says, I'm the roundest pearl on this necklace, I'm the brightest. There comes a moment when it gets tired of this game of staying only on the surface. And it wants to turn inward, it wants to know itself more deeply. However, it is used to dealing only with one substance, which is acrylic. When it turns inward, the thread that passes through it is made of silver. But because it does not know silver, it sees only an empty hole. It feels that inner emptiness and begins to search to see what exists within that void. Until, after much searching, it refines its vision and learns to recognize the silver. It learns to recognize the spirit, which is the silver that passes through it. It sees that little piece of silver running through it and says, I have found my essence. It considers itself a very happy pearl. It looks at the others and says, how happy they would be if they also found their own essence. But this is not yet the end of the pearl story. The ending will come on the day it discovers that the thread of silver running through it, and running through all the other pearls, is a continuous thread. It is one, it is a single current. In other words, in essence, we are one. When we find God within ourselves, we discover an episode of God, a fragment of God that passes through all beings. The Indian tradition calls this current the Satratma. It would be the highest point of human consciousness, that which they call complete wisdom, when we realize that God within us and God within all beings are not many, but one single God. And not just to speak about it theoretically as we are doing here, but to actually witness and perceive this reality. A being who realizes this looks at others and feels that they are parts of themselves. So there is no longer separateness, selfishness, or competitiveness. Such a person works for others as if caring for themselves, as if tending to a member of their own body. The entire process of growth is a preparation to see. A person who is completely consumed by selfishness, if suddenly they were to see that they are not separate, it would be a tremendous shock that the person might go mad, become catatonic, unable to get out of bed, because all their motivations are centered on projecting their own name, on fulfilling their own desires at the expense of others. Suddenly, they realize it's impossible to exist as separate, and the poor soul goes mad. It's like a devastating electric shock. That is why it is said that the pursuit of wisdom is a preparation to see. When there is no selfishness left, the person sees, I'm a cell of the whole, that's fine, I already suspected as much. It takes nothing from you because your pursuit of wisdom has already purified you. The worst thing is for a person to see things for which they are not prepared. Everything comes at its proper time. Some traditions speak about this. Be careful what you ask for, because you might just receive it. If I ask for wisdom, poor me, it's like putting a very high voltage through a small light bulb. The bulb will burn out. It simply cannot withstand it. So, to evolve is to prepare oneself to see a reality that already exists now. Imagine that the divine within us does not belong only to us, but to everyone, simultaneously. It is a thread that runs through all beings, a single thread. He says that unity is the ultimate goal of every search for wisdom. 54. In this way, you will not desire what you should not desire, and nothing in this world will be unknown to you. This is very interesting. Look closely at what he says here. You will not desire what you should not desire. He's not saying you will not desire anything. A wise person, one day, will not desire anything, but for now, he is describing the intermediate steps. Letting go of desires completely is a long and gradual process. We don't have a blackboard here, but imagine the following. There is an equation of movement, the equation of the animal nature, of the animal self, which is a horizontal line. The animal self moves through fear and desire, through pain and pleasure. There's no way around it. That's the motivation of the animal self. I joke with you by telling the story of how to get a dog off a chair. Either you offer him something he likes, a steak, some affection, a female dog. Or, instead, you threaten him, show him a slipper, tell him to get off the chair, stomp your foot on the ground. He gets down, he leaves. Isn't that right? Fear or desire? Pain or pleasure? Is there any other way to get a dog off a chair? Does anyone know one? Do you think philosophizing with a dog would work? It doesn't. It just doesn't. A dog gets off a chair from fear and desire, pain or pleasure. It's the same thing with a little seal at the circus or a mouse in the laboratory maze. Pain or pleasure, fear or desire. This is the equation of animal consciousness, horizontal. Notice that most of humanity also finds itself at this point. Why do we get out of bed in the morning? Because of the smell of breakfast coming from the kitchen, or out of fear of being fired by the boss. It's fear, desire, fear of getting stuck in traffic, desire to earn a salary, fear of this, desire for that. It's not easy. They say there is a vertical line, which is human motivation, human nature, and it is not fear, desire, pain, or pleasure. It is duty. It is action out of duty, with nothing left of desire. Do you know what it means to act out of duty? I have to make a decision right now. What I'll consider in order to make this decision? What does nature expect from me as a human being? Nature expects human beings to be just, so I want to do what nature expects of me. I want to be just. I don't want anything else except to be in harmony with myself. I simply want to honor what nature expects from me. I am not acting out of fear, desire, pain, or pleasure, but out of duty. When a person acts out of desire or fear, whoever holds what that person desires or fears in their hands can control them completely, turning them into a slave. Isn't that so? Look, come here and they'll give it to you, or if you don't come, they'll hurt you. Animal consciousness is highly manipulable, but human consciousness is not, because what a person wants is to be in harmony with themselves they want to be. How can you manipulate something that is inside and not outside? If someone says, "Look, if you do this, I'll hurt you," I'll say, "It is better to honor my human nature and take the beating. Giving up my humanity is too high a price." If someone says, "He'll give you a gift if you don't do this," I'll say, "Does that gift mean more than my human nature?" No, nothing like that. Neither fear nor desire can move me from this place. Fulfillment is within. I only want to be. I want nothing from the outside. So, it is said that a perfect sage, who has already completed the human experience, would act only out of duty, without any desire. But being a perfect sage is still far from our current average. You will notice that absolutes are very rare. Although absolute ignorance is easier to find than absolute wisdom, what we have between absolute ignorance and absolute wisdom are countless ascending paths of beings who seek wisdom, who haven't arrived there and are at different levels. So, we have the proto-philosophers. Here we are in the kindergarten. And ahead we have great philosophers like Plato, Plotinus, but all still philosophers, lovers of wisdom. They give an ever greater upward inclination to the line of their lives. But they are all still seekers of wisdom, lovers of wisdom. Few have reached the level of the wise. If the animal acts out of fear and desire, and the wise act out of duty, what motivates the philosopher to act? By desire as well, and they will act this way for a long time. In the morning, before getting up, if you say, "I will not react out of desire," do you know what will happen? You won't get up because you won't be able to find motivation. So, what is the difference? The refinement of taste. Evolution is nothing more than the refinement of taste, as Sri Ram, a great philosopher of the last century, used to say. Yesterday, I was driven by the desire to have many pleasures. Today, I'm moved by the desire to become a better human being. Isn't it still desire? Yes, but on a higher level. Yesterday, I was driven by the fear of not being recognized by others. Today, I am moved by the fear of causing pain to another human being, of making someone suffer, of not helping people to grow, of living a life that adds nothing. It is still fear, but on another level. Taste is gradually refined until one day it disappears and there is no more desire. This is a long journey, and there will still be desires for a long time. Notice that the verse says, "You shall not desire what you should not desire." That is, to refine your taste so that, more and more, you desire things that are more human and more dignified. But there is no extinction of desires. This still takes some time. To desire what you should desire, to learn to desire what is right, this is called character formation. We misuse this word so much, especially nowadays. We say, "So and so has bad character." Maybe the person does, but perhaps we also are, to a great extent. We don't know what character is. Do you know what it means to have a well-formed character? It is to love what is good and to reject what is evil. And it's not good as in pleasant, but good as a human goal. To appreciate the things that help us grow as human beings and to reject those that make us regress. That's having a formed character. Naturally enjoying what helps us grow. Enjoying what makes us more human and rejecting what makes us more animalistic. That is a well-formed character. Which of us really only likes good things and rejects all bad things? Do you realize how rare that is? Is everything you like good? Is everything you reject bad? No. So, our character is not so well formed either. Therefore, to desire only what one ought to desire means to shape one's own character. There are elements that are extremely important, which we must remind modern humanity of. First, to remember that we are human beings and that we must honor this condition. Second, to remember that we are beings under construction and that we can change. You are not imprisoned by your current preferences. You have the power to transform yourself. So, learn to desire only that which is worthy of you as a human being. And nothing in this world will be unknown to you. What is the connection between desiring little and knowing much? That is what is written. Desire only what you ought to, and nothing will be unknown to you. What could that mean? Perhaps some of you have already heard, especially those who take courses with us, about the allegory of the cave. I won't tell the whole story because that's not the point. It could be a lecture topic. At one point, Plato says that the wise person sees things illuminated by the light of the sun. A wise person is one who sees things illuminated by the light of the sun, and the light of the sun is the idea of the good. Do you know what that means? It means looking at things with the intention of helping them move toward their own good without wanting anything in return, without desires. It's that Platonic equation, which I mention in almost every lecture because it truly is excellent, which says that the threshold of human love is when you stop looking at things and thinking, "What use is this to me?" Instead, you start looking at things and asking, "How can I be of service to this?" When you adopt this kind of behavior, remember that phrase from Tolstoy that I've mentioned countless times. Some walk through a forest and see nothing but firewood for their own hearth. You only see what interests you, driven by your desires. When we look at things filled with desire, they protect themselves, they close off, and we do not truly know them. When we look at things selflessly, they open up and reveal their heart. The one who sees the heart of all things is a wise person. Why does he see it? Because he does not desire, he does not manipulate. He does not look in a selfish way. This is something simple that we notice in our practical lives. If you want to open up to someone, you are not going to open up to a manipulative or self-interested person. You are not going to open up to someone like that. So, who will you open up to? To someone you know does not want anything from you, who only wants what is best for you. Someone selfless, without selfish desires. To this selfless and desireless person, you open up and reveal your heart. Why does this person see your heart? Because they have no desires. They are not selfish. They do not manipulate. Imagine a being who does not wish to manipulate anything, who wants to give themselves to things. Everything opens up to them and reveals its heart. The control of selfish desires and knowledge have an inversely proportional relationship. The fewer selfish desires, the greater the vision into the heart of things. When we do not manipulate, we come to know. This is basically what he is trying to say. So much meaning in a single short phrase, so much detail. All of this is part of what Pythagoras wanted to convey with this code. Only 72 phrases, yet within a single phrase, there are countless ideas. Like all the wise ones, to me, Pythagoras can be considered more a sage than a philosopher. 55. You will realize that people bring misfortunes upon themselves, voluntarily and by their own free choice. Do you know of any Eastern law that perfectly illustrates this? A person brings their own misfortunes upon themselves. Karma, action and reaction. I am constantly planting the seeds of my own suffering for tomorrow. However, I do not connect this sowing with the harvest. When the harvest comes, I blame someone else, not myself. Imagine that you go to a store and buy a very expensive consumer good. And when the bills arrive for you to pay, you blame the government, the economic situation, the ungrateful and materialistic world, but you do not blame yourself for having bought more than your finances allowed. Or you order a dish, and when the waiter brings it, you complain because he brought something very high in calories, but you ordered it. You made the request to nature, and it delivered. You initiated the action, and the reaction is proportional to it. This is called karma in the Eastern tradition, sometimes destiny in the West. Maktub among the Arabs, what is written, but not written since the beginning of time. It is written from the moment we generate the causes. The consequences are inexorable. We would gain so much if we learned this relationship. We would begin to take responsibility for the things that happen to us. If you reflect, you might remember the moment when you created the causes whose consequences now fall upon you. You just need to stop blaming others. The extinction of blame marks the beginning of moral progress. That is Epictetus. When you start taking responsibility for your own life, you begin to understand how things work. 56. How unhappy they are. They neither see nor understand that their own good is right beside them. This is curious. Not seeing, not understanding, we all do this constantly. I had a student who once told me something I found very interesting. Coming from someone who was going through an intense depressive episode, she said to me, "I look at my life and I feel like everything is hell, complete chaos. I'm depressed, so I'm taking an antidepressant. It's a very small pill. When I take that pill, within an hour I look at my life and I think everything is fine. It's the same life, nothing has changed in an hour. How can such a tiny pill help me become more clear-headed? Am I imagining things? What is real? Is my life before the pill real, or is it after the pill? Do you realize that there are many different angles from which we can view reality? Sometimes, through a process of morbidity, of prolonged negativity, we become addicted to seeing life in such a dark way that, at times, it even manifests physically, and the medication can unlock those neurotransmitters, allowing us to see another perspective as real as the previous one. It is simply a matter of looking at the same fact from an angle with a little more light. All of these things exist. You chose to look from the darkest side, and to look toward the brighter side means to draw from them what they can offer you at their best, light. All things are dual in nature. Seek the light within things. Nourish the light within things, not only to draw it out, but also to nurture it, to interact with things through what is most luminous within them. If you look for the dark side of things, you will find it because it exists. If you look for the bright side, you will find it as well because it is also there. It only takes shifting your psychological perspective by a single degree, a small adjustment, and you can already see something different. In other words, do you realize that these realities exist simultaneously and that you will have to make a choice? To choose what you want to see and what you want to work on. Because if you seek morbidity, you will find morbidity. If you seek shadow, you will find shadow. It is a matter of choice. There is a book that I find beautiful. Perhaps it is the best book I have ever read in my entire life. It is an Indian classic called the Ramayana. I am very fond of this book. At a certain point, the god Indra is taken prisoner. The story is complex. He is taken prisoner by a morbid being who was the villain of the story, and Brahma secures Indra's release. Do you know how Brahma enables Indra to free himself? He enters Indra's mind and implants a mental image, "I am free." Then Indra realizes the bars were an illusion. That's all. He enters the mind and implants a mental image, "I am free." And he realizes that the bars were illusory. Another very beautiful historical account is that of an Indian master named Bodhidharma. When this master travels to China, a disciple, Hike, comes to him and insists on being received because he needed to make a request to Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma, who was a great master and rarely received anyone because he lived in meditation, says to him only one thing, "What do you want from me?" Hike replies, "Master, free me from samsara." Samsara is the wheel of days and nights, the wheel of the eternal return of the manifested world, according to Indian philosophy. Free me from this. I can no longer bear this eternal return, this repetition. Deliver me from samsara. Bodhidharma then asks, "Who put you in samsara?" "It was me. All I have to do is realize that I am not there." He became enlightened with just that question, "Who put you there?" "Yes, it was me." In other words, I am only in samsara because I believe I am. Isn't it curious? He became enlightened with that question, "Who put you there?" If I'm in samsara, it is because I believe I am. My consciousness chose this seat. It could be anywhere else. I find this very interesting, and how it recurs across all traditions. The point at which consciousness settles and takes something as absolute truth, and does not recognize that there are other possibilities which most likely exist. And that which our consciousness gives life to begins to take on a sense of reality for us. However, sometimes it is addicted to morbidity and negativity. We must take into account that this is not an absolute truth, that we are not the owners of absolute truths, and that there are other possibilities. 57. Few people know how to free themselves from their suffering. There is a psychiatrist, Viktor Frankl, who worked extensively with prisoners in concentration camps. He said that the way out of suffering is meaning. I find that so beautiful. Do you know how to overcome suffering? By realizing that it is not a torture inflicted on you by some relentless God. Suffering exists only to signal that you are in the wrong place or that you need to overcome something. The way out of suffering is the meaning you find. If you see suffering as pedagogical and notice the direction it is pointing, it automatically becomes redemptive. When you are on the other side, you look back and realize how much it made you grow. You might even say, "It wasn't expensive compared to what it gave me. It was a fair price. Compared to how much it made me grow, it was a good price." Do you understand this? The redemption of suffering lies in finding meaning. If I believe it is chaotic and only wants to torture me, there is no way out. If I realize it is pedagogical and that, through it, I can reach another level of consciousness. Compared to what it provides, it may even seem that the suffering was small. I find this very beautiful and interesting. 58. This is the weight of destiny that blinds humanity. The destiny that blinds humanity has a name, a surname, an address, and a zip code. It is called ignorance. The greater the dose of ignorance we have and keep within us, the blinder we become, and we enter into a suffering that is not redemptive. Suffering that is not redemptive is the kind in which we do not believe there is any meaning. We keep going in circles, chewing over our suffering, victimizing ourselves, and we find no way out. From the moment we believe that suffering is pedagogical, it becomes a positive suffering. There is a duality of sufferings. The Tao Te Ching speaks clearly about this. There is positive suffering, which makes us grow, and negative suffering, which only feeds morbidity. And victimization, in general, the act of shifting responsibility onto someone else. 59. Human beings go around in circles, back and forth, with endless suffering. The evolution of the universe, not just of humanity, is what they call the eternal return. It is a spiral. Human pedagogy was created by imitating the pedagogy of nature. You study mathematics in the first year of elementary school and learn a few things. Then you come back to that point and add a little more, once again returning to it and learning a bit more each time. How did the community learn this? It learned from nature. Life itself is like this. You go through an experience 1,000 times, and each time you do, you learn a little more. Someone is harsh with you. The first time you go through it, you learn 1% from the experience. You will go through something symbolically similar again and learn 5%, 10%. Until one day you will have absorbed 100% from every point along the circumference of human experience. When a person masters the entirety of human experience, they may then ask, where is the origin of the circumference? It is not found at any of its points. It is at the center, invisible to the eyes, from their entire circumference forms. That is when you find the center, your own divine essence. Listen, a healthy life is you moving forward and learning 1%, 3%, 5%. But if you keep passing through the same point and it's 0%, 0%, 0%, 0%, what is happening then? You are going in circles, not learning, not growing. And suffering begins to turn morbid and destructive. It is no longer a spiral, it is a circle. That is what he is saying. Humanity is going in circles. As long as humanity is not willing to see meaning in suffering, to view life as a learning journey, it will keep passing through those same points at the same level. In general, The strategy our consciousness uses, when it learns nothing from experience, is to find someone else to blame. You need to free yourself from that burden. How can you do that? By outsourcing blame. It was someone else, always looking for someone else to blame. I always joke with my students that these are humanity's two greatest inventions. At least the most widely used, the wheel in first place, and in second, putting the blame for everything on others. It's wonderful. It brings a lot of relief. But there's just one problem. You don't grow. That's a serious drawback. If the blame lies with someone else, they need to grow. They need to change. You don't grow. We practice this so much we see ourselves as victims of everything. If we were to look at society on a macro level, every person has their own tormentor. Who is responsible for that person is it's never the person themselves. No one is responsible, and we end up with an irresponsible society. Everyone already has their chosen tormentor. So, it's interesting what he says. We walk in circles. I remind you of Machado de Assis, whom they did everything to make us dislike during our adolescence, because of the disastrous way his books were presented to us. Yet he is fantastic. It's worth rereading him now that we are more mature. In the posthumous memoirs of Braz Kubas, one of the first things that happens, when Braz Kubas is dying, he confronts Pandora, nature itself, who shows him humanity walking in circles and being destroyed down below. She grabs Braz Kubas by the collar, lifts him up, looks into his eyes, shows him, "Do you see who I am?" It's very beautiful. A highly philosophical and Pythagorean passage, we could say. She shows humanity being reduced to rags, wandering in circles down below. Time passes and humanity is swept away. Nature shows this to him and says, "Do you see?" She lifts Braz Kubas and says, "See who I am? Understand my purpose? Do you understand the mistakes that human beings are making? Why don't they learn from me?" It's truly beautiful. Works of Machado de Assis are full of such passages. In his short stories, in his novels, he is, in fact, a philosopher. I believe that my first contact with philosophy was through Machado de Assis. I used to ask myself, where did this man learn these things? I wanted to know these things too. There is something extraordinary behind this man, something he knows that I would also like to know. He possesses a certain understanding of the nature of life, and that is the mark of a philosopher. So they wander in circles, back and forth, with endless suffering. Because they are accompanied by a somber companion, the fatal disunity among them, which tosses them up and down without their even realizing it. The Tibetan tradition calls this the heresy of separateness, which, to put it plainly, is simply selfishness. To feel myself separate from others, to be a promoter of disharmony, to always think as a separate being and not as part of the whole. When deciding what I should do, to always and only think of my own benefit, and not of benefiting the greatest possible number of human beings around me. It's as if you were a piece of a puzzle that overflows and exceeds its original shape. So you have to mutilate the other pieces in order to fit in. You think as a part, not as the whole. It reaches a point where you become a promoter of disharmony, because for you to belong, several pieces have to be removed. In fact, the voice of the silence says that from this, all the evils in the world are born. Because if I feel separated from you, I can conceive that your loss is my gain, that your misfortune is good for me, that your loss is my profit. From this comes violence, deceit, and all kinds of moral flaws that we cultivate, and behind it all is selfishness. 61. Discreetly strive never to awaken disharmony, but flee from it. One of our fundamental struggles, and perhaps one of the core pieces of advice in this code, try not to be a promoter of disharmony. Should the wicked, the criminals, not be punished? Yes, they should be punished with justice, not with hatred. Justice does not provoke disharmony, but hatred does. We tend to think that in order to promote justice we must be angry, but that is an impossible combination. Those who feel hatred do not have the clarity to be just. Justice is pedagogical, not vengeful. Vengeance is always immoral. In order to give each person what is rightfully theirs, we must be clear-minded. And with hatred, we are unable to do that. To do what is rightfully due in a humane way is never a source of disharmony. If you are causing disharmony, there is something you are not doing in a humane way. Seek out what it is. We are all in this together. Let us trace back and see where we are not being humane, because our trail is one of disharmony. Somehow, we are trampling things like a stampede of cattle. It's the trail of a herd, not of human beings. Where I'm being part of the herd. What is happening? To trace and find those cracks where I'm giving up my human condition. And whose trail is one of disharmony. Do not forget, what nature expects from us is that we build ourselves as human beings. She has already done the rest. She does not need you to invent instruments that fly, planets fly, comets fly, everything flies. She does not need you to invent machines that travel at the speed of light. She has already invented light. Nature already has everything. What she needs is for you to invent the human being within yourself. As an idea, she has already conceived the human being, but it is up to you to make it complete, to bring it into the world. For this, she needs you, because you have free will. She cannot force you. This is all that nature is waiting for from us. Therefore, this should be the path of least resistance for our fulfillment. What nature expects from us. Pythagoras, then, will offer a very beautiful consecration, because, in the presence of all his advice, he asks God for help. Suddenly, Pythagoras stops addressing you and begins to speak with God. 62. O God, our Father, deliver them all from such great suffering. 63. Show each one the spirit that is their guide. Give them a little help, Lord. Show them that each of them carries something of you within themselves. Restore in them their self-confidence, their identity. It is very interesting. Suddenly, he pauses and asks God to sponsor the project of building a new human being, because it is a complex path. Then, Pythagoras resumes, turns back to say to you something truly beautiful. It's as if he were saying, look, all right, it's difficult, but not that much. Trust, it will work out. 64. However, you must not be afraid, because human beings belong to a divine race. 65. And sacred nature will reveal and show everything to them. In other words, it's complicated, it's difficult, but in the end, you will get there. Because you have something divine within you, it is only a matter of time before it comes to the surface. The process of education is to educe, to bring forth what is best within us. This pearl that lies hidden inside us, nature is working to draw it out, to bring it to light. You will not keep this pearl hidden forever. Sooner or later, it will emerge. So, no matter how complicated the situation may seem. For example, isn't it a complex time right now to believe in humanity? You have no idea of the risk involved in doubting humanity. This leads us to fall into a state of bitterness, of animalization, into a anything-goes mentality that you cannot imagine. One of the elements that causes a person to become brutalized and lose the moral barrier of values is losing trust in humanity, thinking it's not worth it, that people can't change. If there's no hope, then it doesn't matter what I do. This erodes even the most solid moral principles. Losing faith in humanity is something serious. Pythagoras says it may seem adverse, but in the end it will work out. I guarantee it. There is something divine within you. It's only a matter of time before it comes to light. So, trust. Do not lose faith in yourself or in humanity. Losing this trust brings very harmful consequences. 66. If its sacred nature reveals its secrets to you, you will easily put into practice all the things I recommend to you. In other words, if you realize that there is something divine within you and you learn to listen and to see, living by these precepts becomes very easy. At this moment, we are guiding ourselves because Pythagoras said so, because we sense that it must be true, but we have not yet seen the divine within us. The moment you catch a glimpse of it, it becomes much easier to act according to the moral precepts proper to a human being. So, from the moment we'll purify ourselves, cleansing away all the shadows. Doing what the word intelligence suggests, intelligere, to choose among, to choose between what you are not and what you are. As you begin to find yourself building your own identity, the more you recognize nobility within yourself, beauty, goodness, the easier it will be to practice these precepts. This is a natural attribute of a good, beautiful, and just human being. At that moment, whenever you wish to find your center, seek out what is most beautiful within you. That is your center at this moment. And ask yourself, if this were the only thing in my life, how would I act? And try to act according to the guidance given by the highest point of your consciousness, as close as possible to wisdom. You will notice that the more we advance, the more noble principles we will have to guide us. Imagine those moments when you feel a pain in your heart for humanity. Everyone feels this sometimes. In those moments, being generous is easy, being good is easy, being upright is easy. And what if we knew how to summon this moment whenever we wanted? We would have to learn to evoke this state of consciousness whenever we have to make important decisions in life, to always be guided by what is best within us. As we come to see who we truly are, it becomes easier for us to be increasingly ethical, upright, and consistent. Remember who you are. Be who you are with awareness. Have you ever heard this phrase? It's from a poet named Pindar. Be who you are with awareness. It is enough for you to know, so that you may act as a true human being. Seek to see, ever more deeply, what your true identity is. What brings you happiness, what fulfills you, who you truly are. And mastery over your actions will naturally follow as a consequence. 67. And by healing your soul, from ignorance, from shadows, you will free it from all these ills and sufferings. And not only will you set yourself free, but you will also set an example. You will not free yourself alone, you will set an example. For any wise person who has ever walked among humanity, what matters is not that one person frees themselves alone, but to bring humanity along with them. I give a lecture on Zen stories, on the Zen tradition. And there is a sutra from the Zen tradition that says the following: go together, beyond the beyond, until the ultimate liberation. The Prajnaparamita, go together, beyond the beyond, until the ultimate liberation. In other words, for these wise ones, what matters is that you come, and that you bring with you as many as you can. When a human being attains some measure of virtue, they become a reference point for many others. They shed light on a menu of options that was previously completely hidden. Now there is a human being who has made it. Therefore, this proves that it is possible for me as well. In the Indian tradition, there is an epic called the Bhagavad Gita, which tells the story of a young man, Arjuna, fighting against an army. This battle is symbolic. It is the human being fighting against their own flaws. And Arjuna prevails. At the end of the Bhagavad Gita, there is a passage that says, whenever you feel discouraged or downhearted, look to the horizon and there you will see Arjuna, the prince among men, victorious upon his war chariot over his army of enemies. Do you know what this means? If Arjuna triumphed, you can too. Remember, someone already made it. The power of example. Plato used to say that everyone should have their own personal hero to remind them of how great they could become. So, when we free ourselves, since we are one, it is a part of humanity that has been liberated. If my whole body is bound and just my little finger is freed, it brings more hope to the entire body. And we, humanity, whether we realize it or not, are one body. 68. But avoid foods that are not recommended for the purification and liberation of the soul. In addition to Pythagoras, this group has also been studying the Tao Te Ching in the South Wing on Mondays, and all the time we have to consider all the implications of what he says. Nowadays, we are used to interpreting things literally in a superficial way. It's hard to understand the whys. So, strive to take care of the things with which you nourish yourself. And on which level do you nourish yourself? Only on the physical level? Or are you also constantly nourishing yourself on the mental level? Do you select the ideas you absorb as carefully as you select the food in your refrigerator? Or do you feed on just anything on the mental plane? Do you absorb any foolish idea, any prejudice, any violent thought? And on the emotional level, do you nourish yourself well? Or do you go around absorbing any collective hatred, any collective passion, and just go along with the crowd, just to belong, to think like everyone else? On the energetic level, do you know how to maintain positive energy, or do you absorb the negative energy around you? In other words, we nourish ourselves on all levels of the quaternary. Selecting food well on the physical level is something that many people are concerned about today. But sometimes people have no awareness at all of the ideas they are taking in, nor of the ideas they are offering to nourish the people around them. We must be very intoxicated on the mental level, as we exercise almost no discernment. On this level, we should have a mental gourmet to provide us with good recipes, a healthy diet for these planes. In other words, choose your nourishment well, because the intoxication, the harm, and the losses that come from it are proportionally greater and more lasting the subtler the plane on which you are becoming intoxicated. 69. Carefully evaluate all these things. Reflect, reflect. Learn to evaluate, to reflect, to think about them, even if it was Pythagoras who spoke. If I follow the recommendations without thinking, I will do it because Pythagoras said so. This does not raise consciousness. Human evolution is the growth of consciousness. Evaluate, reflect, measure, ponder. Or the world today, philosophy seems like madness because people are not in the habit of analyzing each situation in life, weighing each proposal that life presents as unique and unrepeatable. The fact that two people say two identical things does not mean you have to give the same answers. The person who said it is different, the intention is different, the moment is another. To know how to analyze each moment of your life as unique and unrepeatable. Do not fall into this kind of laziness, because the mother of all laziness is mental laziness. Do not try to apply a single rule to various similar situations, because this causes all the misunderstandings in the world, since nothing is exactly the same as anything else. Have this vital curiosity to evaluate everything that passes before you and to learn from everything. Draw from each experience a new possibility for dealing with human nature or relating to nature as a whole. Look, I hadn't thought about that detail. I recall a small incident that I usually share because I find it interesting. It's not very significant, but I like to show that, from time to time, we should trace within ourselves evidence that we are philosophers, even to reason with our own minds. Things that help solidify our identity. I remember that I once saw a television program showing how wine is cultivated in Europe. In the capitals that have large vineyards and produce wines of great quality. I don't like wine or any alcoholic drink. I don't drink. But the process was so interesting that I stopped to watch. They showed that, on a grapevine, they prune the lower branches and leave only one branch at the top. Do you know why? So that the sap has to work its way up to that point. Therefore, it becomes purified along the way. When a cluster of grapes is produced up there, those grapes will be more refined, because of the effort the sap had to make to reach that point. If you leave all the clusters, you won't have grapes of such high quality. Isn't that interesting? I thought, if I cut away everything that is inferior, if I keep only the highest feelings and thoughts, won't life in order to reach that point be purified? Won't I also produce the best fruits? Does this logic of nature apply to everything? Whoever thought of this is a genius. I wonder if he applied it to himself. Notice that anything can be a lesson from nature. It must apply to 1,000 other situations. Cultivate this philosophical spirit. Always seek to learn. Even if it's from a drink you don't consume, if it contains intelligence, it carries a touch of the divine. If it carries a touch of the divine, I'm interested. I want to know what God intended there. What recipe did he leave there? What can I learn from it? 70. Always seek to guide yourself by divine understanding, which should guide everything. As I mentioned earlier, strive to be guided by what is closest to the divine within you, by what is highest, by what is noblest in you up to this moment, always aiming to be a little more tomorrow. Just like in the Hindu prayer, may I do my best today, but may I be able to do more tomorrow. Always guiding myself by what is closest to the divine that I have found so far. I cannot commit myself to what I do not have, but with the best that I have, I must commit myself. When I use my best, the tendency is to develop tomorrow branches at an even higher level. The tendency is to refine more and more. The tendency of a good winery is to make better and better wines. Because it always strives to do its best, it does not accept just anything. 71. Thus, when you leave your physical body and rise into the ether. 72. You will be immortal and divine, you will have fullness and will die no more. You have morally purified yourself so much that you have burned away all mortal elements, and have attained a certain degree of eternity, even while still within matter. Perhaps you have already heard of Osiris, Isis, and Horus from Egyptian history. I won't tell the whole story as it's long and needs a lecture. There is a moment when Isis worked as a wet nurse for the daughter of the king of Libya, who had a son, the prince. The goddess Isis became so fond of this baby that she decided to make him immortal. She would light a fire inside the room, a fire that was not physical, but rather a symbolic fire of wisdom. And she would place the child within the fire to burn away everything mortal in him, so that he could become a little god. But the people did not know who she was. One day, the mother entered the room and saw her son inside the fire, and she did not find it pleasant at all. It was a scandal. The mother was terrified, and the goddess had to interrupt the process, so the boy did not become immortal. At that moment, she revealed herself as a goddess. In any case, the story is complex, and I am just sharing a detail. In a certain way, symbolically, we are burning away our mortal principles. In this fire of moral purification, in these moral principles that are being proposed, in such a way that you begin to develop what I mentioned in the previous class, and the one before that, which I talk about because it's one of the most beautiful concepts I know, and which Sri Ram calls the boat. Sri Ram is a philosopher from the last century, about whom I have given a series of lectures, including In Search of Wisdom, available on YouTube. Sri Ram says that this here is a boat, and your divine consciousness is sailing in it, in the world. You know that you will eventually lose this boat. When you lose the boat, what will your consciousness travel in? He says, build your own boat. When you possess a deep, genuine value, the certainty that justice and love truly exist, a profound vision that the universe is divine, clear evidence of the existence of God, any one of these elements. It is not bound by time. It is not a child of time. It is eternal. It is your boat. If you possess one of these elements, your consciousness will embark on it and not sink. It will be able to continue sailing through the waters of eternity when you must leave this boat behind. You must build a boat so that your consciousness does not become a castaway. When you let go of this one, you must have other boats. Evidence of a spiritual world, values, virtues, wisdom. Some vision of something profound, sacred, that gives you certainty that the world is not just appearance. This is your boat. Consciousness must have somewhere to sail so that it does not become a castaway. I remember an American psychiatrist, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was a thanatologist. She worked with terminally ill patients. I find it very beautiful that, in several of her books, she recounts that often a terminally ill patient loses consciousness, falls into a coma, or sometimes into a state of mental alienation because, as she says, the the consciousness cannot bear. To confront the fact that everything it has done was illusory, that it has nothing, that it has built nothing real. It is left without any support to stand on. The consciousness has nothing that will not be taken from it. It has built things that will remain in the garage, or inside the house, or in the bank account. It has nothing real that it can take with it, and if it has nothing, it cannot stand on its own. It sinks, it plunges into unconsciousness. It is very similar to the idea of the boat, do you see? If consciousness has some deep spiritual experience, it remains standing. It reaches the threshold of death lucid. They say this is the best way to make that transition. It stands because it has something to stand on. It has its boat, something that nothing and no one can take away from it. Well, as I promised, I have presented to you the recurrences. The recurrences are a summary of the summary. You have the handouts I distributed with the summaries. And at the end are the main ideas. Notice that basically everything that was said is there, in a concise way, for us to keep in mind. To honor those to whom we are grateful and to our commitments. In other words, to honor those who help us grow and the commitments we make in order to grow. The feeling of honor, to know how to be connected with what is constructive for us. With those who help us grow, and with the pacts and commitments we take on in life. To have good friends. Remember, love everyone, but bring the good ones into your inner circle. Let your friend be an inspiration for your growth, and you for theirs. Bring the good ones into your inner circle. To overcome passions does not mean to extinguish them, but to master them. Practice virtues, perseverance and consistency in the practice of virtues. Even if I fail here and there, I do not give up on myself. I cannot give up. I do not have the right to give up on myself. There is no other alternative. Think before acting. Always, always choose prudence. Courage, as Plato says, is to maintain clarity of mind in extreme situations. In situations at the limits of fear and desire, to be able to remain lucid, even when the world around you is trembling. There is a very beautiful poem by a Brazilian poet named Cruz e Souza, called Inner Smile. Read it. He speaks about this, the being that is, and that never wavers. He depicts this being, the world collapsing around him, and yet he smiles amidst the waters of the flood. It is beautiful. Cruz e Souza is a truly special poet. Patience with pain and with human instability. Patience. We have something that is part of the Earth's geography, peaks and valleys. We have something solar, but until we are able to shift our consciousness from Earth to sky, patience. From time to time, there will be valleys, but that doesn't mean life is over. You may have lost a battle, not the war. Have compassion for yourself and for others. Understand that a crisis is a good moment for you to gather momentum and rise again. Crises are full of opportunities. Crisis is pedagogical when you say you would like to become a better human being. Perhaps you are telling nature, send me crises, send me problems, because through problems, I see who I can become something better. If I do not see them, I have no way to propel myself to another level. So, the crisis came because you wanted to grow. If you did not want to grow, there would be no reason for suffering. What would it be then? God's sadism? In a certain way, suffering comes because we wanted to grow, to go beyond what we once were. We must learn to recognize this as something that has its positive side. To develop understanding. To reflect, to analyze each situation that life presents to us, to care for the body and the mind without excess. Do not spoil the body, care for it with justice, but also care for the mind and emotions as you care for the body, to understand that the laws which govern one also govern the other. Nightly reflection, which is our daily journal, evaluating what you did with your day, whether it aligns with your sense of purpose or not. Consecrate your actions. Take a moment, mentally, to do them in the name of God. Take that which is most sacred to you, that element which inspires you the most, and do the things in your life in the name of that, mentally, a consecration before everything you do. You notice you feel modesty about causing offense. Let's say, for example, that you admire your father, that he is a great person to you. If you do something in the name of your father, you will feel reluctant to do it poorly. How could you offer something vulgar at the feet of someone who is so important to you? You will feel a sense of modesty about doing things carelessly. You will want to give your best. The sacred is the function of giving meaning. The sacred lifts us out of the ordinary and brings us into a world where things are endowed with human meaning. So, we must know how to make use of this tool. The sacred is a wonderful tool to escape from banality, to escape from arbitrariness, to escape from unconsciousness. Practice rules with discipline, perseverance, and consistency. Make a decision on the mental level. I want to be, I'll get there. And, in the concrete world, without haste and without pause, never give up. Perseverance and consistency. Consistency means always remembering why you act, where you want to go. Perseverance without consistency becomes mere automatism. A decision on the mental and physical level, perseverance and consistency. This is discipline, this is the equation of will. Currently, willpower is exactly this. Always remember your purpose and always move in that direction. And, from time to time, assess whether you are heading in the right direction, which is what the journal is for. Understand diversity and unity. Power is always limited by necessity. Do not judge your friend for any small mistake, because power is limited by necessity. His personality still has ordinary needs, but within him there is a being who wants to improve. Understand that, at times, power is limited by these needs. Do not look down on someone because of this. Learn to understand yourself as well. Do not be indulgent with your own mistakes, but strive to understand them, and know how to act strategically so that you are not always defeated by the same enemy. Cruelty in judging the mistakes of others, when turned upon ourselves, destroys us. It is very complicated when people who are highly critical go through a crisis, because when they turn that machine gun on themselves, nothing is left standing. It is terrible. Critical people, when they go into crisis, rarely come back. To become immortal, which is the ultimate goal of everything, after all, remember, he makes a vow. If you do it, it will happen. Remember, there is a verse that says, I swear. Immortality is not a fantasy. It is a goal that can be achieved, and this is the path. Well, I hope this review has been useful for you. For better or for worse, I advise you to fold these pages and always keep them close at hand. Until the day you have it more or less memorized, because if you read it every day, eventually you will memorize it. I can't stand reading this anymore. Yes, you can. Read it again. Read it every day, and without much effort, in a year you will know it by heart. And believe me, this was not proposed by just anyone. It was proposed by someone who, themselves, had achieved these goals. Therefore, someone who has used a map and successfully reached their destination is qualified to say, this map is good. Trust it. Basically, that's it. I hope this will be as useful for you as it has been for me. Thank you very much for your kindness. Answers to some questions. Question: when you spoke about good as an archetype,
Are there archetypes for opposing ideas? Is there an archetype of evil just as there is one of good?
no, because archetypes, virtues, do not belong to the material world where everything is dual. For example, is a ball good? Some players will say it is. Others might say that another ball, from a certain brand, is better. In the manifested world, things are always dual. But goodness is not of the manifested world, it is of the spiritual world. It is not dual, it is absolute. Evil is just the absence of goodness. It is the void. Defect comes from defectus, meaning emptiness or lack. It is not a being in itself. It is the shadow where the light has not yet arrived. A very good soccer ball, let's say it has 90% goodness and 10% evil. Why? Because the manufacturer has not yet perfected the process to create a perfect ball. Evil is not a being in itself. Evil is the void where the light has not yet arrived. It is the shadow. Now, the spiritual world, the world of ideas, does not have duality. There, goodness has no opposite. There, beauty has no opposite. Here things are dual, but in the spiritual realm they are not.
In the archetypes, does only virtue exist?
Exactly. In the archetypes, in the realm of ideas, only virtues exist. They have no opposite. They cast shadows in the manifested world, but the shadow is not a being in itself. It is simply the absence of light. It is a void. That is what defect means. Defectus, a vacuum, an emptiness where the light has not yet penetrated. In truth, it is building an element of purification because it is a moral code. There is an example we use to explain the Stoic school, a moral school that existed in ancient Greece and later in Rome. Imagine there is a balloon tied to the ground. And inside this balloon, which is a dirigible with those baskets people travel in, there are some people talking about the clouds. Clouds are like cotton, they are like foam, they look like smoke. And they stay there, discussing the clouds among themselves. You say, look, stop talking about the clouds, cut the ropes that tie you to the ground, and naturally you will rise up, reach out your hand, and see for yourself what the clouds are. Rather than speculating, you experience it directly. If you cut what holds you to the ground, you will naturally rise and be at the same level as the clouds. So you will no longer speculate about them. Just reach out your hand and see what they truly are. In other words, for the Stoics, metaphysics was the crowning achievement of morality, and morality is what we are called to practice right now. Human beings possess a kind of reverse law of gravity. We have an upward tendency. If what binds us to the ground is cut away, to cut what ties us to the ground is moral purification, a moral code. In general, when we speak of morality, we do not speculate much about abstractions. Speculation leads to vanity and fantasies. The ideal is to have humility, cut what binds you to the ground. In doing so, you do not speculate, you observe and realize. Naturally, metaphysics follows. Once you remove everything that hinders you, you rise. And then you will find yourself in a world where you can truly perceive the nature of things. At its core, every moral code comes down to one thing: purification, cutting the ties that bind us. Cut the ties, and everything else will be added to you naturally. We recognize this. Of course, we are speaking of something grand, but we are also speaking of something small. Remember, whatever will bear fruit in the future must have its seed now, because otherwise there would be nothing from which it could arise. The fruits we have now were seeds in the past. That is Buddhism. What will bear fruit in the future must have its seeds in the present. We already possess the seed of it now. A victory you achieve over a flaw. Today I managed not to do a certain thing. Tomorrow you will see life with greater clarity. You will look at your problems, you will look at people, and you will understand them better.
Question: even if you encounter the same mistake tomorrow?
Look, if you fall into it, you tend to experience the karma of lost trust. You have to recover, you have to rebuild. But the small victories we achieve, even before a future setback, will create a window of clarity that you will notice. It's fascinating. A victory, and when you look at things, it seems you see with greater clarity, you understand people more deeply. Well, I suffered a defeat, I analyzed it, I learned from it. Sometimes you grow just as much from defeat as from victory. It depends on how you face it. I took a hard fall, but I learned something valuable. So, it was good. It's not just about always winning, it's about learning from everything. You realize that when you move forward a little and consolidate your progress, you start to see things with new eyes. I wouldn't have been able to see that person yesterday the way I see them today, even if it had been explained to me in every possible way. Because it's not a matter of explanation, it's a matter of a level I didn't have before. Today I have the level to see them from a different altitude. It wouldn't have helped for you to tell me this person is like this or like that. I wouldn't have agreed. Because I wasn't seeing it. Now I see, because I've moved to this new place, and I'm seeing from another level. When we reach the level where we can truly perceive what duty is, no explanation will be necessary. It will be obvious. For now, whatever I explain is just a definition, because we are still very bound and limited. It's like the story of the turtle and fish. The turtle goes to land and returns to water. The fish asks where she went. The turtle says she went to land. The fish asks what land is. The turtle says that it's very complicated. The fish, dissatisfied, argues that he is intelligent and clever, that he will understand. The turtle tells him the fish is inexperienced. He insists. Land is made up of little pieces. The fish imagines a bunch of little balls of water in each of these pieces. Land isn't wet, it's dry. He imagines dry water. There's no way. All he knows in his life is water. He doesn't have the mental resources to imagine land. The day he becomes an amphibian, he will see, but for now, it's impossible. First, learn to breathe outside of water, and then you will see. For now, all you will see is water. We always associate things with the world we know.